One of the very first things that I like to do when I boot up a new racing game that I haven't played before is to look through the vehicle lineup to see which ones are cool, maybe which ones are returning faces from sequels, maybe which ones I wasn't expecting. And for me, this was very much so one of those occasions, because of course this is my very first bike review from Ride 3, and the reason why I've chosen this one to start off with is very specifically because of all the bikes that I noticed. And I actually had no idea that Benelli was even in the game at all, so that was a pleasant surprise. No other bike that I looked at in the game, and no other bike that I've ridden in the game so far, put as big a smile on my face and surprised me so pleasantly as this one did. Because even though I don't talk about Benelli that often on the channel, they're actually one of my favourite motorcycle brands. This bike is the reason. Now, there are different versions of the Tornado. There's a 900, there's this 1100, so for those who maybe are not familiar with Benelli, which chances are is most of you, especially if you're not bike aficionados, what is this all about? Why am I so happy to see this bike in the game? You might also be thinking, if you're not familiar with the brand, it kind of looks familiar. There's a little bit of MV Agusta to it, maybe even a little bit of Aprilia factory. Well, that's essentially what it kind of is in my opinion. This bike essentially combines the more affordability and kind of accessibility and almost forgiving nature of an Aprilia RSV with that more ultra exclusive rarity and style and beauty of an MV Agusta and a Bimota. Now unfortunately, it's a little bit closer to Bimota in terms of the lack of reliability, or in other words, living up to being Italian. On the other hand though, it's a fast and certainly unique bike. Now one of the first things you'll notice about the bike is the colour. It's kind of unusual to have green and silver or green and grey, and that is actually Benelli's trademark colours. I love that. Straight off the bat, I think it's a very cool combination to have, and it certainly makes it stand out. Would I choose it on any other bike? Probably not. But for some weird reason, I really think it suits this one. The second thing that you've probably noticed, which is a little bit more strange, is that back end. You can see it has a very Aprilia or even Japanese style side exit single can, but what are those two yellow things underneath where the pillion would be? Well, those are actually the radiator fans, and there are very few bikes to have that kind of distinctive rear profile. And being, as many of you know, a car fan and a racing fan, well, you can probably guess what those two fans remind me of, and it's certainly something which would endear me to the bike. Of course, I'm referring to the Chaparral 2J fan car. But still, it's a novel idea, of course it's a gimmick, but to me gimmicks are the spice of life, and if you can do something and make it look interesting and oddball and unique, well, why wouldn't you want to? Now in terms of the engine, it's relatively unique even there, but what is interesting is it's not a big twin like a Ducati, it's not a 4-cylinder like a lot of Japanese bikes, it's actually a 3-cylinder, as the name suggests, the Tornado 3 1130, an 1100cc 3-cylinder bike. Very unusual choice, and that choice is what gives the bike that distinctive sound. And the thing to me which I find very interesting about the noise that it makes is it almost makes the engine sound smaller than it actually is. In fact, it's a world apart from most other Italian motorbikes. Ducati's got that distinctive grumble, even Aprilia's with like an aftermarket can. They're pretty beefy, pretty deep. Something like an MV Agusta, they're a little bit higher pitched but very smooth and very distinctive. This, it's a screamer. And I think it's a very cool engine note to have for such a big capacity bike. Now in terms of the spec, it's powerful, it's torquey, and it's not overly heavy, and that's a good combination to have, especially when the performance category is only 500. That is not particularly high. In fact, it's one of the more modest bikes in that regard, especially for its engine and power. Because, in terms of power, this bike is actually up around a Bimota DB7 kind of territory, 163 horsepower. It's got 125 newton meters of torque, which is healthy, and it only weighs 198 kilos, so it's certainly no Yamaha R1, but at the same time it's a good 10 to 15 kilos than, for instance, the latest Ducati Panigales, that kind of stuff. Now, of course, it's not as quick as those, but at the same time you could argue it's not necessarily trying to be. This is more what I would say is in the camp of something like a Bimota. Bimota can make extremely fast bikes, but most of them aren't necessarily trying to be. They're more bespoke, they're more unique, and you could argue they're more about the riding experience rather than just the best possible lap record or highest possible top speed. To me, that is what Benelli is going for. Now, in real life, one of the shocking things about this bike, they are dirt cheap here in the UK. You can literally buy them for like 4 or 5 grand. And although that is predominantly due to the reliability issues which they have, again, it's Italian, so you can't be too surprised. At the same time, it carries that over into the game. It's shockingly well priced. 19,500 credits is brilliant, and it's not even a DLC bike. It's already in the game from day one, so you can just save up 20 grand and buy it. In fact, it's one of the most attainable bikes that I love in the game. Now, in terms of the handling and the feel and the performance, in real life, up around 170, 180 is healthy enough. In the game, it's not the fastest thing in a straight line, and it certainly feels a little bit heavier than some others, mostly because it is heavier than some other Japanese bikes, but overall, I love the way this bike performs. It has a unique look, a unique sound, the handling is smooth but kind of focused, almost like you're on the razor edge between forgiving and challenging, and it's a great place for the bike to be. It suits the style, it suits the look, and if you're looking for an Italian bike which is literally like no other bike out there, with similarities to others but no actual samey kind of stuff, then check out the Tornado. It is one of my lower key favourite motorcycles, and I just don't get the chance to talk about it that much, but I'm glad that it's in the game. It's one of my favourite new additions, maybe even my favourite new addition, and of course stick around on the channel for more Ride 3 content. But that's it for this instalment. Of course, I will see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.